that aren't able to join us today. If at some point my audio goes out, would someone please let me know? I've had trouble with my audio. So thanks for coming. This is the mini meeting on the Worldview assignment. I like to share some information with the students because oftentimes that there's little tips that I have for you. The common places where students have struggles with the Worldview assignment, and I'm glad that you can either attend this meeting or watch it afterwards, just so you can be prepared for what's coming and how to do best on this assignment. And there's three different times that we'll do this, so you have 3 times to try. All right, so we'll start looking at Peerceptiv and just kind of explaining what Peerceptiv is and explain what Peerceptiv is and how we're going to use it. I'm going to try to share my screen, and there we go. All right, let's share my screen. Okay. All right, so Peerceptiv is the system by which we're going to submit and review and read and grade the Worldview essays. You'll learn why in a moment, but Peerceptiv, it's been around for a long time. We're gonna have trouble. Oh no, it did a
Growth is your goal.
it sent us to a video. That's what it did. It's not what we need. All right, here we go. That's what's happening. I see what's happening now. Let's go back. Let's see. There we go. All right, so what is Peerceptiv? It is an objective, research-validated platform. It's a double-blind, cloud-based peer review system for students to share their work with their colleagues and their classmates and to give and receive feedback on that work. It's based off of, at this point, probably a decade and a half, almost 2 decades of research. I think it's 15 years. And in my opinion, it's as reliable or more reliable and as valid of an assessment as a single instructor. You think about an instructor that has 200 students in their class, everyone's submitting an essay every 2 weeks. And so that's 200 students, 200 essays. And so there's a thing called grading fatigue, which happens, and it's unfortunate that it does, but there's just a lot of grading that goes into reading all of these. And so while I want students to know that this is a system that benefits them in terms of grades. So it's very reliable, it's very accurate, and there's a lot of benefits to using it. So some of those benefits are that it can help improve your writing, critical thinking skills, and your analytical reading skills. You're going to do more than just write with this assignment. You're going to, one, think about what your worldview is and why you formed it, and you're going to write that down and incorporate course concepts in the process. So you're going to be practicing your writing skills, but you're also going to have to critically think as you write and also critically think as you review and provide peer feedback for your peers. And you have to use analytical reasoning skills to determine where on the rubric you think your peers' essays may are at. So I think these are important skills to develop, because no matter where you go, you're going to have to write things, you're going to have to think things through critically, and you're going to have to be able to give and receive feedback. Giving and receiving feedback is very, very helpful, and it is a very powerful way to learn. And remember that feedback is just that. It is feedback about a product, not a person. And so let's remember that as we move forward, that we're providing feedback on work and not the people. Especially true as we talk about our worldviews and how we form them and who we are. Remember, we're providing feedback on writing and not necessarily what a person thinks. I want to make sure very, very clear, no one is getting scored on what they think. It's rather how they explain what they believe and what they think using the course terms and how they explain that in their writing. So it doesn't matter what your worldview is. It can be the exact opposite of your classmates or someone else. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just, can you explain it using course terms and strong writing skills. It also creates a student-to-student teacher relationship. And as if you've ever had to teach something to someone else, you realize that you have to learn it a lot better. And so you're going to have to understand the assignment and understand what it is to explain what your worldview is You have to understand that well and understand the course concepts in order to be able to have a productive student-to-student relationship, teaching relationship. So it is very important. Please do not put your name on your essay, and you do not need to create an account with Peerceptiv. Don't do either one of those things. So you will click on the Peerceptiv link in Canvas. I'll show you in a minute where that's at. You'll answer a few questions, and then you're automatically registered in my Peerceptiv course. You want to access Peerceptiv only through Canvas. That is very, very important. If you try to email me and ask me for a course code, I will tell you that you have obviously forgotten this or skipped this part. It is only going to work for us through Canvas. So that's very, very important. So there are 3 steps to this process. The first is that you're going to upload your product. In this case, it's going to be writing to the Peerceptiv platform. You'll follow your instructions. Really, I think they'll accept Word documents, and they accept a variety of different documents, but ultimately you're submitting your writing. The next stage is the peer review stage. And this is when you're going to peer review 3 of your peers' essays. And the last stage, this is called feedback stage. It used to be called back evaluate, but this is when you're going to provide feedback to those students, your classmates, that provided you peer reviews. So there's 3 different steps. So you're going to access it from Canvas. It looks like this in Canvas, and we'll take you there, and I'll show you there in a moment. And then when you access that, you will see something that looks a little bit like this. And this is just the first one. So important, do not put your name on your essay. Do not put your name anywhere in the wording that you're talking about. Don't put in, hey, my name is XYZ, and this is what I think. Don't do that, because that eliminates the double blind system that we've created. I know who you are. I can track everything without names. You can revise your submission up until the review period begins. And so notice that there's 3 different dates. And so this says September 18th. So that is when the due date is for the submission. And so if you wrote it today before this meeting, and then you watch this meeting, you're like, oh, I need to fix some things, you can resubmit. You can resubmit up until the due date, which is going to be 2 p.m. on September 18th in this case. But otherwise, it would just be the due date and the due time. You can always resubmit until that time. So you click on that link, and it would take you and you'd submit. So when you do that, you'll upload a document. It will ask you to review it and confirm that that's what you want to do. Make sure that you review that and you confirm that that is the one that you actually want to submit. It has happened on occasion, because we do 3 of these, that in later iterations, someone has accidentally uploaded the wrong one. So try not to do that. So do double check the one that you're submitting is the thing that you actually wanted to submit. So there's going to be a due date, the assignment given. There's no late penalty so long as you submit by the deadline. And there is a late penalty. You can submit late. You can with a late penalty. You can only submit your writing late up until 24 hours before the review deadline. Now, you will have a late penalty, but you can do that. 24 hours before that review deadline, though, everything's closed. It's closed for submissions. You cannot, because they need to make sure that every essay has the chance to be reviewed. So students can submit late up until 24 hours before the review deadline. You cannot access, here's an important thing, you cannot access an assignment to peer review unless you have already submitted your own work. Here's the kicker. If for whatever reason, things just go off the rails for you and you don't actually get to the point where you've written your essay, if you wait until 24 hours before the review deadline, you will be able to review essays. That gives you 24 hours to review 3. So that's the nice thing about this, is that there's multiple places that you earn points. So it's not just the writing, it's the writing, the peer review, and the feedback. And so make sure that if you missed it, if you somehow just didn't turn it in, wait for this window and do peer reviews. So do 3, if not 6. So 3 are required, but you can do extra for extra credit. Okay, so I think this is what it's going to look like on your end. There's this little submit button. This little arrow is like blinking as far as I can tell. This is your main student dashboard. So you have a submission, and then once the submission closes 9/18 at 2 p.m. For fall 2023. But then the review stage begins, and you'll notice that it'll tell you how many that you need to complete. There's 3 required, and that closes at that time. And then the feedback begins, and you will provide feedback for all of the reviews that you received. All right, so when you log in, you're going to log in when you're doing the reviews. And what's going to happen is you'll log in, you'll request a document to review, complete the review, submit the review, and then request a new one. Now, if there's an error, like if you notice that someone submitted like a blank document, or someone, like if you see something like that, you can flag it. Please do. Please flag something that looks like really off. Like if someone just accidentally, another example is occasionally people will accidentally upload the template that hasn't been changed. So if that's the case, please flag it, and it will send a message to me, and it can get resolved, and we can contact the student and fix the situation. But make sure there should be a button that you can flag them. As I mentioned before, you need to do 3 to get the full credit for your task score, but you can do up to 3 extra for 3%, 3% extra credits. So that's 3% of 50. So that's up to 12% of 50 points. If you start an extra review, make sure that you finish it. Peerceptiv doesn't recognize if you started an extra one and not finished it. It might count against you if you don't complete an extra one. So make sure you finish them. They shouldn't take you excessively amount of time. All right, so there is a rubric. This is only a portion of it. The rubric is visible in Canvas. And so I highly, highly recommend that you look at it. We'll look over it today, but what's going to happen is for every element of the rubric, there's going to be a part that you provide a number for, 1 through 7 in most of them, and I think another one is 1 through 3. And then you're going to provide a comment. And the comment is when you're reviewing a peer's essay, you're reviewing and you're providing a number, a numerical score for that element of the rubric, and you're providing a comment for why you selected what you did. So this is great is not helpful. You need, if they got the 7, identify what it was that they did so well. If they didn't get the 7, if they got anything, just tell what was done well or what could have been done, what was missed. So for example, you only defined 2 out of 3 terms, or one of your definitions isn't accurate, or one of your terms isn't a course term. So make sure that you say those things. So at the end of the peer review stage, we go into the feedback stage. And this is when every student is going to provide feedback to the students that gave them peer reviews. And that scale is from 1, which is the lowest, to 5, which is the highest. And you also provide a comment as to why everyone got your peer review. You gave that score to your peer reviewer. So this is just to help the peer reviewer recognize whether or not how well they did in their peer review process. Make sure you click on the save button and provide feedback for every review you received. Okay, so there's a couple of components that make up your grade. So one is the document score. So this is determined by weighting and normalizing of the peer review scores and my benchmark scores. Okay, it is a complicated algorithm. I need to make it very, very, very clear that you are not grading your peers. That is not how this works. I hope that's perfectly clear. If you have questions about it, by all means, reach out and I can send you a much more complicated explanation. Second is the review scoring. So the quality and the accuracy of the peer reviews. So how accurate are your reviews as a peer reviewer, and how helpful are your comments? And that helpfulness comes back from, remember this, so that the scores that you receive as a peer reviewer here play in. So make sure you pay attention to the rubric and score accurately. And then finally is your task score. So this is just for completing tasks. Did you provide 3 peer reviews? And did you provide feedback to everyone that peer reviewed you? That's it. That's the task score. And then you can receive up to 12% extra credit. The extra credit is already baked in to your final score that you'll receive in Peerceptiv that links back to Canvas. So it's not going to appear any place extra. It will be baked into your final score. So a note about academic dishonesty, please don't do it. I will see all activity. Suspicious things are flagged. So for example, it shouldn't take you 1 minute to provide feedback. It should take you longer than 1 minute to do a peer review. So I'll let you know that I can get and I can access the logs for how long everyone spends in the system. And so just know that. I can override all grades, and I will, and I have. Please do not try to skim by the work and receive credit, but without actually doing the work, because it's pretty obvious when that happens. And one, your score will not be what you want it to be, and I'll override it. And two, you can get a 0 or worse, and which would mean that you could be reported to the Honor Council for fabrication or some other type of academic dishonesty. It's happened before, not as much in recent history, but I have had to report people to the Honor Council for committing or doing academic dishonesty in Peerceptiv. So please don't do it. All right, so let's stop there. Let's use the chat and see if there are any questions so far before we move on to the next part. Any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. There is a Q&A. Let's not use the Q&A because then the question isn't visible to everyone. But if you have a question as we go along, please, by all means, let me know. So with that, we're going to move on and we're going to look at Canvas itself and the assignment itself. Okay. Okay. So when you're getting to, oh, sure. Okay. So here we go. So now we're in the week 4 module, and you'll click on the week 1 reflection. And then I recommend that you read these things before you begin. So this assignment explains that there's more tips in there. I will go over some of those today, but I do recommend that you read it. Here's the template. Use the template. Don't think that it's going to be easier if you don't. Like, it will be so straightforward if you just use the template. Everyone uses it. It makes everything much simpler. So use the template. We'll talk about the template in a minute. Read the rubric. Make sure that you know what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Like, this is the great way, whether it's this assignment or any other assignment, if there's a rubric, read it so that you know what you're expected to do. I have given you a strong example and a weak example, and in those, I have a rubric that's filled out, and I say why each one got the score that it did. So review that so that you can see, all right, this is what a good example is, this is what a not so good example is. And then you'll use that template to write it. We'll go through the peer review process. Here's some notes about peer reviewing. Provide effective, useful, actionable, and empathetic feedback. It should be goal-oriented. Let them know what it was that they should be doing. Highlight an area of you want to identify where they could have improved. We're not really worried about minor grammatical or spelling errors. It's not what we're here for. The feedback should be actionable. It should be something that they could do. And it should be student friendly. So make it easy to understand, easy to read, make it positive. Like, remember, we're providing feedback on work. So you're not critiquing people. We're providing feedback to help people improve their writing, okay? And their ability to execute the assignment. I will let you know that you need to keep an open mind as you do this assignment. This assignment may challenge your perspectives on things, whether it's your own or others. This may make you feel a little uncomfortable because you're going to read about what other people think and why. And that's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable during learning because that's where learning is really happening. But please remember, you are not being judged. You're not being judged for your worldview or your background or anything like that. We're looking at writing and how well we can communicate what we think with course terms. Okay. So this is where transformational learning happens. And then we're going to the feedback stage. So this is what it looks like in Canvas. So this is all the text that I've given you to kind of explain the assignment. And then down at this bottom is a portal that is the Peerceptiv. So it looks a little bit different for me than it does for you. For you, I think it will look like this, if we're seeing that. Yeah, so you can see that. So it looks like, for you, I think it looks like this. Okay. All right, so let's now look at, we're going to do, all right, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to share new, and I want to talk about the template. Okay, so the templates. You have access to this, download it. You're going to select one of multiple prompts. So I think in Worldview 1 and 2, I think there's 3 prompts. There might be 4 in one of the prompts. So you're going to select one. Okay, so please note this. Note, select one and write parts A and B for that. And students then delete the other topics. So for example, here's the first one, carrying capacity, worldview. So that's all 1. Conservation of biological diversity is 2. And invasive species is 3. So let's say you wanted to write on invasive species. You would take and you would delete all of this. Just go away, just delete it. So that the only thing that you're submitting is, you have this part, and then you have the part, this is important, like this helps people understand, like not everyone's gonna write this one, so please keep that part. I tell you what the questions you're supposed to answer. You take this part out, this is the part you'll delete, and this is where you write what your worldview is, okay? So for this one, I ask you, do all species introduced or not have the right to exist in an environment in which they are established? What if an invasive species drives a native species to an extinction? Does it make a difference if the invasive species arrived on its own or is introduced by human activities? You need to integrate and define 3 course terms. So that is a key thing here. You're going to answer those questions, describe what your worldview is, and while you're doing it, you need to incorporate course terms. Let me pull out the book. Okay, so the course terms are in the glossary. So they are highlighted, they're bolded in the book. So as you're reading and you find a bold term, so let's say I just opened to page 224, and it's talking about underpinnings of agriculture, and it lists colony collapse disorder is in bold. So that means that's a course term. Okay, those are our course terms. I will go by that. So some people will try to use a course term that sounds like it might be a course term for our class. It must go back to our course terms. I will check them. Okay, so we need to use course terms from the glossary of the book, and you need to define them. You can do this many ways. You could write out your term, and then you could put the definition in brackets. You could write out the term and then put a comma and then briefly define the course term. Those are the 2 main ways that people do it, or it could be like the next sentence. But the point being is you need to define those course terms. Please highlight the course terms that you want to count as your 3. It's very helpful. Please highlight those. This is what you're being scored on, is how you can describe what your worldview is while incorporating course terms and defining them. Please focus this section right here on describing what your worldview is, not describing the problem. That is a little superfluous. So I've described the problem here. So please try not to repeat this, but explain what it is that you think your worldview is. So what do you think? Okay. So that is the what. That's why what is so big. Okay. Next is the reflection. So this is where you'll delete this. Note that everything that you delete is in brackets. Note these brackets right here. You always delete the brackets. Okay. So you remove this underlined statement and write how you formed your worldview. So you need to be specific. And this, for example, This is what I was taught as a kid. This is what a class taught me. This is what my religion teaches me. Those are all great starts, but not nearly sufficient. Okay, so you need to dive in and describe life experiences, something that shaped your worldview. Okay. One of the flaws, one of the very common places where students do not earn full credit points here is they start to re-explain what their worldview is. Please don't do that. You will lose points. So you will know if you're re-explaining your worldview, if you start saying things like, I believe, I think, in my opinion, all of those things, all of those statements are what your worldview is, not how you formed it. I'm looking for you to reflect back on your history, your learned, your experience, your culture, your experience, your life experience, and think about what has shaped your worldview on this topic that you want to share. Now, the reason why there are 3 topics is because there might be something where you just can't think of what it was that formed your worldview, or don't have a strong worldview, or you don't want to share those things with anyone. So then in that case, pick a different topic. There's 3 of them. For one, that's one of the reasons there are 3. So make sure that you pick another one. So let's look at the rubric as well. I think that will be very, very, very helpful. We'll go look at the rubric. Pull that up. Rubric. Okay. All right. So here's the rubric. The first one. Did the author explain their worldview for each question in the prompt without elaborating or further explaining the prompt or the issue? So 1, clearly explains their worldview. The prompt explanation for the worldview is 6 standard length sentences or 6 lines of text. I make this very clear in the rubric or the template as well, that when you write, you need to write and incorporate 3 course terms, and you need to write a paragraph that consists of at least 6 sentences or 6 lines of text. Okay, so 6 lines of text is the minimum, which is really not that much. So clearly explains the worldview, but is less than 6 standard lengths of 6 lines. Answers the prompt, but is not clear or does not answer all the questions. Unclear, unfocused, meandering explanation. So you want to think about this before you start writing. And this might take you a little time to think how you want to phrase yourself, but try not to meander and like go off topic and all of those things, and really address the questions. And note that this has a weight of 2, which means it's worth a high amount of points. The quality of the fraction, also worth 2. Did the author reflect on the specific reasons why they hold their worldview and how they formed it? Okay, so the author should not re-explain their worldview, and they should seek to convey the feature of their own experience that have resulted in the ways they view that prompt. So again, they're specific, and it's 6 lines of text. Correct inclusion of the course terms. So did they correctly include 3 course terms? Please note that as you're reviewing, if someone doesn't highlight one, that's not a reason to not cut them off, like give them like a 3 instead of a 4. So use your critical thinking skills and find and look to see if they have a course term they just didn't define or they didn't highlight. It's highlighting is not required. It's just highly, highly recommended because it just makes life easier. So include your course terms, which are found in the glossary, and then define them. And those definitions need to be sufficient to show me and your peer reviewers that you understand what that term is. And the terms that you do include, please make sure they fit into the context of what it is that you're describing. And so it needs to be very clear that you're not just throwing course terms in just to throw them in, but that it needs to make sense as it is all read together. So if you're just throwing course terms in just to have them and it doesn't make sense in the context, then that will lose you points as well. Okay. With the last thing, we'll just look at the worldview assignment explained. So So yeah, so you get 20% for completing the peer reviews and the feedback, 60% for the writing, and 20% for the accuracy and quality of your peer reviews. Note there's no late work for the feedback stage. Let's see, use the template, make sure you read the template, use the template. Here's an example I'll share with you about sufficient explanations. Insufficient. I think this way because of my religion. Insufficient is to quote people or books without discussing what those words mean to you. Do not use a 2-line quote as your explanation for how you formed your worldview, but don't tell us why those words resonate, how those words resonate with you and how they shaped your worldview. Vague explanations of this is how I was raised, this is what I learned in a class. You need to give examples. You need to give details. Building on vague examples for that gives a better explanation. For example, I believe this about, I have this worldview about invasive species because I value all life. I value life because my parents taught me to respect nature and plants. We would adopt stray cats and dogs, and we garden. My mom would explain the value of each bug and their overall experience or ecosystem in our garden. And then you go on to explain that for 4 more lines, because notice this is only 2 lines. Okay. Please proofread. This one place, this thing right here, is probably the biggest place where students make mistakes. So please look at it as you read your reflection and ask yourself, is this saying what I believe or why I believe? So please ask yourself that. Okay. Oh, no. So someone asked, on the strong example of the worldview, the student bolded sentences in part A. Is there anything specific we must bold in part A and not highlight? So it's recommended that you just highlight your course terms. You don't have to, I think that person might have done it just to make it more clear. You don't have to do that. But it's highly recommended that you bold your, or I'm sorry, you highlight your course terms. But I understand that I think some people might have had formatting, and maybe the word processing system that they were using didn't translate highlighting. And so I think they might have bolded instead of highlighted. So no, you don't have, really, it's just the course terms, which are found in the glossary of the book, that you bold or you highlight or bold. Just need to draw attention to them. So thank you for that question. With that, I think that's really everything that I want to share with you about the worldview assignment. So if there are no other questions, then that is the end of our mini meeting. Thank you all for coming. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But thank you for coming. I really hope this is helpful. So you all have a great day.